In my work as a divorce coach for men, I've seen over 400 men go back to dating after divorce. Sometimes these men were married for 10 years, 20 years. I've even seen men who were married for 45 years go back and start dating again. And as you can imagine, I've seen men jump back into dating post-divorce at all different stages of readiness and with all different degrees of success. So I've been able to learn a lot through that process, and I've put everything that I've seen into this ultimate dating after divorce checklist. You can download the checklist itself for free. You'll find the link for that download in the video description below. I want to be really clear before we go into this checklist. This is not going to give you an exact moment of when you should start dating again. And if anybody tells you that they can, that if you check exactly these things off and then you go out dating, you'll have absolute success, they're not being totally honest with you. The truth is that you're the only one who can accurately assess when you're really ready to get back out there and start dating. I can give you a guide, but I can't know everything about you. I can't know everything about your situation. And one of the things that I've learned from the men I work with is that everyone is different. There are some people who can go back to dating much earlier than others because they have a mindset around learning and growing and healing through dating. There's others that really need to be in a fully healed place where they feel super confident, solid in who they are, and are really ready to move forward into a new relationship. Where you are on that spectrum is going to vary based on your past history, what happened in your marriage, other relationships you've been in. So there are, unfortunately, no hard and fast rules that work for everybody when it comes to dating readiness. So what this checklist, what this guide and this video is meant to do is give you a guide. It's going to help you identify which areas you need to do more work on. And as you read through it, you're going to start to notice, yes, okay, I feel ready. And you'll start to recognize, okay, how many of these boxes do I personally need to check off to feel confident, to feel comfortable getting back out there and dating? It is my hope that by the end of this video, you will have a clear sense of where you're at and where your work is. So this isn't just going to tell you, am I ready to date or not? Where am I at on that scale? It's going to show you what specifically you need to work on to continue healing, to really recover from this divorce and get to a place where you can jump into healthy relationships. Because I know if you're like the men that I work with, you are not looking forward to going back out and dating and playing a bunch of games. And you don't have to. That's the beautiful thing. If you start dating before you're ready, you're going to find yourself getting caught up in all of the tactics, the strategies, all of the games. And honestly, you don't want to be dating the women that you have to play games with to date. When you are really ready to get back out there, when you're really healthy and healed from your divorce, you're going to find that you can connect on a very genuine human level with other people, and that there are women out there ready to connect in that way as well. And then you don't have to play games. You can just have good quality relationships through dating. All right, so let's look at the checklist. There are 6 main areas that we're going to work on and look at to evaluate where you're at in your dating readiness. So the first area we want to look at is whether or not you're over your ex-wife. If you're ready to date, you're over your ex-wife. If you start dating before you're over your ex-wife, you're going to find that you're really using dating largely as a distraction to get away from the painful emotions of your divorce. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And some of the men that I work with actually find that dating helps them finish getting over their ex-wife because it shows them that, okay, I am desirable. There are people out there, there are women out there, there's a lot of women out there that I could have a good relationship with, and they're not all like my ex-wife. So there is a phase, a stage where dating can help you push past and really get over your ex, but you've got to be mostly over her, or at least ready to get over her and let her go for dating to work in that way. Otherwise, it's just going to be a band-aid and a distraction, and you're likely to end up hurting yourself or the people that you're dating. So how do you know if you're over your ex-wife? There's 5 specific areas that I ask my clients to look at. One is, how do you feel when you think about her? If you're over her, you're going to feel calm. If you're not and you think about her, you're going to feel all kinds of other emotions, from anger to resentment to guilt to shame to sadness to anxiety to outright fear to rage. If it's anything except calm, peaceful, compassionate, you're still holding on to her in one way or another. The second one's a big one. Have you forgiven her? And forgiveness is not for her, you guys. Forgiveness is for you. Forgiveness is a very specific part of the healing process that allows you to release anger and resentment so you don't have to carry those forward for the rest of your life. If you want to talk more about forgiveness, I made a whole video about it. It's up there in the card, so you're welcome to click through and we can talk more about forgiveness. The third sign that you're over your ex-wife is that you're not thinking about the past, about the divorce, about the marriage throughout the day, every day. Most of the men I work with in the earlier stages of their divorce recovery journey are just overwhelmed. They can't get their brains to stop ruminating, to stop thinking about the past, the good things, the bad things, what they did wrong, what she did wrong, the things they all did right that she can't remember anymore. And their whole day gets caught up in what was, in the remembered past. When you're over your ex-wife, that's not where your thoughts are. You're able to be present and you're also able to think about the future. The fourth way to check whether or not you're over your ex-wife is whether or not you see her in every woman that you date. If you're still really holding on to that marriage, she's going to show up everywhere you look, and you're going to find yourself expecting all other women to be like her. This is actually a part of the fight or flight response in the brain. It causes the brain to take one threat, the qualities that are present in one threat, and generalize it to the entire population, right? So what this woman did, who she is, how she acted, how she betrayed you, those traits are all going to get expanded in your mind and associated with every woman. If you're over your ex-wife, you're going to start seeing women as individual human beings instead of seeing your ex-wife looking back at you in every face, in every female face that you see. The last sign that we're going to check for to see if you're over your ex-wife is looking at your motivation. Do you do things for yourself because they feel good to you, because they matter to you? Things like exercising or eating well or taking care of yourself or working on your business? Or are you doing them because you want her to see that? You want her to see how well you're doing. You want her to see that she messed up. What's driving you in your self-care? Is it what she thinks, or are you truly doing it for yourself? All right, so I think you guys can see that already just in this very first category, just starting to look at these things, there's a lot of different areas you might have some work to do. It says you go through this checklist, what I'd encourage you to do, if there's any of these that you feel like, yes, I really do feel calm when I think about my ex-wife, check it off. If it's something that still needs some work, put a circle around it so that you know this is an area, okay, I need to come back and really focus some attention here. What do I need to do to get to this point? All right, let's keep going. The second area we need to look at to see if you're ready to date is whether or not you're feeling emotionally secure enough to go out on a date. What does that mean? First, it means that you're no longer constantly angry or frustrated. There is a phase in divorce recovery where anger is really, really important. It can be an essential part of reclaiming your identity, letting go of your ex-wife, standing up for yourself, and it can move you out of depression and despair and suicidal ideation and bring you back to life. So anger and frustration are not necessarily bad things, but if you're still in that phase, you are not going to have a lot of success dating. I see men trying to date in this phase, and those dates just turn into ways to confirm to them how awful women are, and they usually go very, very badly. So there's a place for anger in the healing process. If you're in that place, then I would not recommend starting to date just yet. The next sign we look for is whether or not you know how to regulate your emotions. So being emotionally secure enough to date doesn't mean that you always feel good, doesn't mean that you always feel calm and happy and joyful and peaceful and loving. It means that you know what to do when strong emotions come up. Do you know how to regulate intense anxiety or fear? Do you know how to regulate anger? Do you know how to work through shame and guilt? Do you have the skills to regulate your emotions so that they don't hijack your brain and drive all of your behaviors? If you are not sure what I'm talking about, or you'd really like to be able to regulate your emotions, but you have no idea where to start, go down to the video description. There's a link there for my free masterclass. It's a whole hour-long talk on how to regulate your emotions, what that really means, what it looks like, and the steps you need to take to get started doing it. Another way to know if you're emotionally secure enough to date is whether or not your sense of well-being feels stable. And this is a little bit harder to define, but you'll know it. If you take a couple of deep breaths and you check in with yourself, how do you feel? Do you feel okay? Do you feel like you're going to be okay? Where is that inner sense of well-being? And again, this doesn't mean that you don't have ups and downs, good days or bad days. There's a thread that's present when you're feeling more emotionally secure, more emotionally stable. There's this thread of stability that you know, even as these ups and downs are coming, even as you're going through them, that you're going to get back to this calm, centered, balanced place. So it's almost kind of this middle point, and your emotions might come off either side, but you can always feel that that's there and you have confidence you can get back there. If you're emotionally secure enough to date, you're willing to get rejected. This is a huge one. You guys, please do not start dating if you are not ready to hear somebody say, no, I don't want to see you again. It's not about you. This is all about not taking things personally. Just because somebody doesn't want to date you, it does not mean there's something wrong with you or broken inside of you, or that your ex was right to leave you. And if it feels like getting rejected is going to be devastating, it's going to damage your sense of self-worth, your self-esteem, your self-respect, if it's going to put you into a dark place, this is not the time to start dating. We need to work on that sense of value in yourself first. We need to build a healthier relationship with you so that you can be rejected, you can hear someone say no, and not take that on and make it mean something about who you are. If you're emotionally secure enough to date, you are comfortable feeling uncomfortable emotions. This takes us back into that emotional regulation work, and it just, again, means that you can go through those natural human ups and downs and not freak out without your nervous system going into fight or flight because you're feeling a strong emotion. And finally, you're emotionally secure if you're sleeping well. Sleep is an excellent way to gauge where you're at in your emotional regulation and your emotional stability. When you're not sleeping well, and this can be either side, it can be that you're waking up in the night or you're only getting a few hours of sleep. It can also mean that you are sleeping all of the time and not waking up. Either of those things, having a hard time getting up out of bed and having a hard time sleeping, they're both signs that your nervous system is in distress because of your emotional state. So when you're sleeping well, getting a good amount of whatever number of hours of sleep your body needs throughout the night, that's a great sign that you're in a more emotionally secure place and more ready to date. The third area we want to assess when we're looking at your dating readiness is whether or not you've taken the time to grieve the loss of your marriage. How do you know? Right? You've been sad. I'm sure you've been through a grieving process. How do you know if it's been enough time? Well, there's a couple of real simple signs we can look for. One is that the crying has stopped. Doesn't mean you never get sad. Doesn't mean you never cry, but it means that you're not crying randomly throughout the day, maybe every day. Many of the men I work with go through a period where there's just so much intense grief coming up and it's almost feeling out of control. That phase has passed if you've given yourself real time to grieve. Another sign that you've taken that time is that you're not thinking about the divorce constantly. It's not where your brain is. You're not stuck in those ruminating thoughts. You've actually processed those feelings and your brain has been able to let some of that go. When you've grieved, you start to feel whole. Again, this is a little bit more subjective, but do you feel complete here, you on your own, or does it feel like a piece of you, a part of you is missing, has been lost through this divorce and you're still grieving that loss? If you've taken the time to grieve, you can look back on your marriage and feel calm. Looking back, remembering the past, the good times or the bad, no longer puts your nervous system into a fight or flight response. And one of the clearest signs that you've really taken the time to grieve and have moved through that grief is that you're able to look ahead. You're able to look at the future with some degree of excitement and optimism. If you can't see the future, if it's foggy or dark, or you just can't even imagine it, that's a sign that your nervous system is still in distress. There's still a lot of emotions, sorrow, and grief that needs your attention. It needs to be processed before you're going to be able to look ahead and start building a new future. And when you're dating, that's what you're doing. Dating is part of creating that new future. The fourth area that's important to look at is you. How do you see yourself? And so we look at, do you know who you are after divorce? For most of the men I work with, especially the men that have been married for a long time, the marriage was really a huge part of their identity. They saw themselves as the protector, the provider, the husband, the father, the rock in the family. And when you're in that role, when that's your identity for decades, and then you get divorced, it can leave you with this real uncertainty about who you even are. Who are you outside of the marriage? And it's important to do some work around that and start to get some clarity about who you are apart from this woman before you jump in and start dating. If you don't do this work, if you just start dating right away, what usually happens is that you're looking for a replacement. And now you're looking for somebody else, these women that you're dating, to tell you who you are. And that's really shaky ground because you are giving up so much of your power. And now you're looking for proof of who you are to be reflected back from these other people. But these other people are caught up in their own things, in their own lives, their own doubts, their own fears. And so they're not accurately going to reflect back to you who you are. And often you're going to find yourself really at the mercy of whatever they're going through and finding yourself defined by that. So I would really encourage you, don't go down that path. Take some time to figure out who you are outside of the marriage before you start dating so that you're not looking for that from other people. So how do you know if you've done this? There's a couple of good signs. One is that you see yourself as lovable. If you're looking for proof that you're lovable by dating, dating is going to be difficult, unpleasant, daunting, scary, and incredibly anxiety producing for you. Do that work on your self-esteem, your self-respect, your self-love first. Next is that you don't blame yourself. And please listen to me here. This doesn't mean that you don't take responsibility for your part in the divorce. There were mistakes you made. There are things that you did wrong. You can own that and take responsibility for that, but you're no longer blaming yourself. There's not that constant inner critical, judgmental voice telling you that you're a failure, that you messed up, that you let yourself down, that you ruined everything, right? That kind of intense self-judgment that often accompanies divorce, especially for a lot of men who didn't choose the divorce. It can be really debilitating. And if you're still holding on to that blame and you try to start dating, it's going to impact you. You're not going to be able to just be this calm, present, engaged person. Again, you're going to be looking for validation from the people that you date to combat that sense of shame and self-judgment. If you've done this work to know who you are after divorce, then you'll have a sense of direction in your life. Maybe you don't have it all mapped out. Maybe you don't know exactly what 5 years down the road looks like, but you're starting to look ahead. You're starting to have a sense of the things that you want to do, the things that are important to you and of value to you. And to some degree, you're happy on your own. So if you are feeling still like it's intolerable to be alone, and you're dating out of that, out of the need to get away from being alone with yourself, again, dating is going to be anxiety producing. There's going to be a ton of pressure on it, and you're going to have a very, very hard time choosing good partners because you are going to be so desperate to not be alone with yourself that being with anyone would be better. And you're likely to fall right back into unhealthy or even toxic patterns that were present in your marriage. So taking the time, and this one is hard because if it's painful to be alone with yourself, learning to be alone with yourself is difficult, but it's so important. This is maybe the most important work that you can do. Learning to be in your own company and be okay with that, without distress, without pain, without fear, without anxiety, without needing to constantly buffer or numb or distract yourself. All right, there's 2 more areas we're going to look at. I know this is a lot, you guys. Thank you for bearing with me this long. As I said, this is the ultimate checklist to dating after divorce. So we're going to look at every area of your life. And these are all of the different areas that when I see men really focusing on them, doing the work in these different areas, and then going out into the dating world, they have an amazing time. Dating becomes fun. They meet great people, and they start to have relationships that are deeper than their marriage, connections that are more genuine, more vulnerable, more open than they had in their marriage. Before we go on to these next 2, I actually want to give you 2 examples. There's one client that I worked with a couple of years ago. His name was Bob. And he did work in all of these areas, you guys, and it wasn't easy. There was a lot of betrayal. His ex-wife had cheated on him. They had 2 young kids. She ended up having a baby very quickly with her new partner who happened to be a friend of his. It was a really painful, really messy divorce. Bob did this work on himself. He did the work to let her go, even to forgive her. He did the work to know who he was, to get really emotionally secure. And then he started dating. And just a few months after dating, he shared this beautiful comment with me in the Better Beyond Divorce community. He said, after just 4 months, I feel closer to this new partner than I ever did with my ex-wife. She knows all of the darkest parts of me. She knows all of my dark secrets, and she's okay with it. Right? And what was the difference? Why was this relationship? He was only with her for 4 months. He'd been with his ex-wife for 10 or 12 years. right? But because he had done the work to create that emotional stability, to be solid in who he was, to let go of what had happened in the past, he was able to connect in this much deeper, more intimate level with this new partner. I see this pattern over and over again. Tommy's another client I had. His divorce was also messy. He had to cohabitate with his alcoholic ex-wife for quite a long time with their teenage kids. His nervous system was in so much distress when we started working together that he was shaking throughout the day. After doing this work, Tommy was able to start dating. He met an amazing woman, I think on eHarmony, and now they're actually engaged to be married. And he has said the same thing as Bob. There is a different kind of connection with this woman. There's a level of honesty. There's a level of trust. There's a level of openness that was never present, even in the early days of my marriage. Because in the early days of his marriage, he didn't have the emotional security or the sense of self that was necessary to create that kind of expansive, open, vulnerable relationship. Right? So doing this work, it's not just about, am I ready to go out and date? Am I ready to have sex? Am I ready to be intimate with somebody? It's, am I ready to have a different kind of relationship, a healthier kind of relationship? And that's why I say when you do this work, when you can start to check things off this list, you don't have to go and play games in the dating world. You just go out as yourself and you meet good people. And that's what I see happening again and again to the men that I work with. All right, so there's two more areas we want to look at on the checklist. One is that you have a support system. And this might sound like it doesn't have a lot to do with dating, but it's actually really important. There's a lot of couples, a lot of the men that I see, it was really just them and their ex-wife against the world, just the two of us, our little family unit. Maybe you had kids, maybe you didn't. The men that I work with that don't have external support, they don't have friends or family or coworkers or support groups, it's much, much harder for them to recover from the divorce in isolation. And if they try to start dating without creating some other support systems around themselves first, they end up in the same situation again where everything, all of their needs, all of their human needs for connection, intimacy, social interaction are all put on this one person. And that's an incredible amount of pressure on any relationship. As humans, we are very social animals. We need connection, and we need a lot of different kinds of connection. And one individual person cannot provide everything that we need in terms of relationships, community, and connection. So when I see men focusing on creating external support, building relationships outside of romance, outside of romantic partnerships, and then they go into the dating world, again, dating becomes lighter, more fun, more open, and there's so much less pressure, intensity, and need in that date. So I would really encourage you to focus on this part of the checklist before you start dating. So how do you know if you have a support system? One way is to have close relationships with friends and family. Right? Who in your life can you call? Who do you call? Who calls you when they need support? If you don't have family, if you don't have a lot of close friends, this is an area you can start working on. Right? You can start looking to meet people, look to meet other men, go to meetup groups, find ways to connect with people in a non-romantic context, and start exploring what it's like to build friendships. For a lot of us, we haven't done this since elementary school, so it can feel kind of strange as adults, but it is incredibly rewarding. If you engage in activities outside of work and dating, that is going to be a wonderful boost to your support system. They don't necessarily have to be social activities, but they can be. But doing things outside of just your job and dating is going to be really important to meet your needs for connection. And remember, connection is not just about people. Right? Humans get a lot of value out of feeling connected to nature, connected to animals. For you, it might be trail running in the woods that gives you a sense of peace and connection. That can be part of your support system. I know men who do volunteer work with dogs. Anything that helps you feel connected, whether it's a connection to another person, a spiritual connection to God or a higher power, a connection to nature, a connection to animals, connected to something outside of yourself, that is part of your support system. When you have a good support system, there are people that you can talk to when you're facing challenges. Right? There's somebody you can pick up the phone and call when you're having a hard time with things. This is essential. There have been some fascinating studies that show us that when you have somebody you trust standing next to you, obstacles look smaller. My favorite study, there was a researcher who had people stand at the bottom of a big hill, and he had them assess how difficult they think it would be to climb to the top. And every time that they did it by themselves, they ranked it as more difficult than if they had a good friend or family member standing next to them. So having somebody that you can rely on, somebody that you trust, literally makes life's challenges seem easier to overcome. So building that support system, making those connections can make a huge difference in your life across the board, and definitely makes the challenges of dating easier as well. And the last checkbox here is really important. It's the ability, feeling like you're able to connect and make new friends, make new connections with people. So it's okay if you're starting from scratch here, if you don't have a support system, if your ex-wife's family was your only support system, all is not lost. A huge part of the benefit of a support system is not just having them, but developing the capacity to make those connections that create the support system. So if you're starting from scratch here, that's okay. This is a skill that you're going to be building. And so start slow, but start looking for ways to connect. Start looking for ways to build those new relationships. All right, the last area we're going to look at to assess your readiness for dating is whether or not you have solid relationship skills. And there's a few particular steps we want to look at here. One is that you understand what went wrong in your marriage and the part you played in it. This means you're not just blaming your ex-wife. It also means you're not just blaming yourself. And it means really being able to step back, look at the cycles of interaction that you and your ex-wife were caught up in, recognize the role that you played and the role that she played, so that in the future, you can recognize these kinds of cycles as they start and interrupt them before they turn into these just downward relationship spirals that can tear couples apart. To be able to have healthy relationships, it's important to be able to talk about what you feel, which means you have to know what you feel and have some basic emotional regulation skills. So being able to identify and also feeling comfortable talking about your emotions is going to make a dramatic difference in the quality of your relationships, romantic and otherwise. And I think a lot of men are raised to think that if they talk about their feelings, women are going to think that they're weak or sissy and not want to be with them, or you're going to get put in the friend zone. But being able to talk openly and honestly about your emotions while taking responsibility for them is an essential skill to building intimacy and developing healthy relationships. Learning to respond to criticism with curiosity instead of defensiveness is a powerful relationship skill. And it's one that builds a lot of intimacy in relationships. Criticism is not always about you. If you're curious and somebody says, oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that, or it really upset me when you did X, Y, and Z, or I can't believe you forgot to do X, Y, and Z. If you get defensive and fight back, you start one of those cycles, right, of escalating intensity. But if you stop and say, oh, can you tell me more about that? What was that like for you? You're going to get all kinds of information about your partner. And often what you'll find is that the offense, the thing that you did wrong, actually isn't about you. It's a projection from something that they're going through. But you never know that if it just escalates. And if it is genuinely about something you did that was hurtful to this person, being curious gives you an opportunity to learn how to repair that rift in the relationship. So curiosity in response to criticism creates opportunities for healing and growth for both people in the relationship. If you're able to take responsibility for your own happiness and not rely on your partner to make you happy, that is an essential relationship skill, and it's going to make dating so much more enjoyable. It's also important to know what you want from a partner in a relationship. I see a lot of guys who haven't checked these boxes off, jump into dating without ever really thinking about what they're looking for. What kind of person do they want to be dating? What are the values that are important that you share? What kind of lifestyle preferences do you want to make sure this person has? But if you never think about what you want and you're just going into dating hoping that this person will like you, it's very easy to get caught up in a relationship that's not really good for you. And maybe there's some passion or sexual chemistry between you, but if you don't have common values or shared dreams, it's going to be very, very difficult to make a relationship work. So having a sense of what you actually want going into dating is really important. And this is important as well if you don't want a partner yet, right? Maybe you just want to get your dip your toes in the dating scene, see what it's like. Maybe you want to date casually for a while. It's important to know that so you can communicate it to the people you're dating with and you don't end up in these miscommunications or in situations pulling you into a relationship that you don't want or that you aren't ready for. And the last box to check is, does dating sound fun to you or not? When you have solid relationship skills, when you have grieved your marriage, when you have gotten a sense of who you are, when you have a good support system, dating might be a little nerve-wracking still. There might be some anxiety, but it should sound fun. You should be a little bit excited about it, a little bit curious. There should be some energy there. When dating starts to feel fun, that is a great sign that you are really ready to jump in and start exploring this dating world. As you'll see at the bottom of the checklist, you don't have to check all of these boxes in order to be ready to date. The goal of this checklist is, one, to give you an idea of where you need to focus your attention, which of these 6 areas is the most important for you to work on right now, and 2, to help you get a sense of what level you need to be at in each of these areas for you to feel comfortable dating. For some of you, having 2 out of 6 checked off under one of these might be enough. And you're like, you know what, that's okay, I'm ready. I'm going to learn these things and grow through the dating process. If that's how you feel, great, go for it. For others, you're going to look at this and be like, no, I really want to check all of these off before I feel ready to date. It's important to me to really be in that stable place. And I don't know that I can learn through dating until I'm there. So much of that is going to depend on your history, your current emotional state, what you went through in this divorce, before this divorce, in your childhood. So please use this checklist and be really honest with yourself. There's a scoring system at the bottom if you want to do that. But mostly, I would encourage you to use it as a guide. Where is the next area that you need to focus on to really recover from and heal from this divorce so that you can start to build a bright, happy future with healthy relationships going forward? Remember, you can download the checklist in the video description below. Thank you guys for watching. This was a long one, and I will see you in the next video.